It was a bright Saturday afternoon. The sun was shining through the trees, and the local neighborhood park was full of the usual weekend buzz. Kids were running around, parents were chatting on benches, and someone was flying a kite in the open field. Everything looked peaceful. Just another calm day in the suburbs. A young boy, around 12 years old, pedaled his new red bicycle along the path that circled the park. His helmet was a little too big and his shoelaces kept coming undone, but he didn't seem to care. His face lit up with excitement every time he sped up, and his laughter echoed through the park. He had recently moved into the area with his mom and was still getting used to the new neighborhood. Today, he decided to explore the park on his own. He stopped near the swings for a moment, catching his breath. Some younger kids were playing tag nearby. He smiled, gave them space, and walked over to the water fountain to take a drink. After that, he sat on a bench, scrolled through his phone for a bit, then hopped back on his bike and kept riding. From the porch of a nearby house, a woman in her late 50s watched the boy carefully. She had lived in the neighborhood for over 20 years and took pride in knowing everyone who came and went. She noticed the boy but didn't recognize him. That was enough for her to become suspicious. She crossed her arms, squinted her eyes, and muttered to herself, "Who is this kid? He's been circling the park for over 15 minutes now. Why isn't an adult with him?" She watched a little longer. He keeps stopping and looking around. He's probably checking out the houses, she told herself, her tone sharpening with worry. Instead of minding her own business or asking the boy if he needed help, she reached for her phone. "I'm not taking any chances," she whispered. She dialed 911 and told the dispatcher that a suspicious young boy was riding around the neighborhood, possibly scouting homes for trouble. She didn't mention that he was just a kid riding a bike. She didn't say that he hadn't done anything wrong. What she focused on, though she didn't say it directly, was the color of his skin. As she spoke to the dispatcher, she kept her eyes on the boy, who had now stopped near a big tree and was trying to tie his shoelace. A couple walking their dog passed by and smiled at the boy. He smiled back and said, "Nice dog." They laughed and kept walking. Everything about the moment was normal, except in the woman's mind. When she hung up the phone, she walked toward the sidewalk, pretending to water her flowers, but really just trying to keep an eye on him. She looked proud of herself, like she had done the neighborhood a favor. The boy, still unaware that anyone was watching him, parked his bike and sat down near a tree, pulling out a sandwich from his backpack. It was peanut butter and jelly, slightly smashed but still good. He took a bite and pulled out a comic book. This was his quiet time. No school, no chores, just him, his bike, and his stories. About 10 minutes later, a police car slowly pulled up near the park. 2 officers stepped out. One was middle-aged and serious-looking, while the other looked younger and more relaxed. The older officer adjusted his belt, looked around, and then walked toward the boy. The woman who called the police stepped onto the sidewalk, nodding toward the officers like she had done her duty. The boy noticed the officers coming and stood up, a little confused. He wiped his hands on his jeans and looked at them politely. "Hey there," the older officer said. "Can we talk to you for a second?" "Sure," the boy replied, a bit nervous but still calm. "We got a call about someone riding around the neighborhood," the officer continued. "Mind telling us what you're doing here?" The boy blinked. "I'm just riding my bike. I live here. We moved in last month." The younger officer looked at the boy's backpack and bike. "You live nearby?" "Yes, sir. Right down that street." "With my mom." The woman stepped in before the officers could respond. "He's been circling the park for almost half an hour." "I didn't recognize him. He looked suspicious." The boy turned toward her, surprised. "Suspicious?" "I was just riding my bike." The older officer asked, "Do you have any ID on you?" "I think I have my school card," the boy said, digging through his backpack. He handed them the card, which had his name and middle school on it. It also listed his new address, right in the neighborhood. The younger officer looked at it and nodded. "Looks fine to me." But the older officer seemed unsure. "Do you have any way to contact your mom?" he asked. "I can call her," the boy said, pulling out his phone. His hands were starting to shake a little. The small group of people who had been in the park were starting to gather. A couple of parents nearby looked concerned. One woman pulled out her phone and started recording from a distance. The boy dialed, but before the call connected, a sleek black SUV turned onto the street and stopped near the park. The engine shut off and a tall, confident woman stepped out. She wore jeans and a blazer, sunglasses resting on her head. The second she saw her son with two officers, her walk quickened. The boy looked up and ran toward her. "Mom!" She hugged him tightly, her eyes quickly scanning the situation. "What's going on here?" she asked firmly. The officers looked at her, then back at the boy. "Are you his mother?" the older officer asked. "Yes, is there a problem?" The woman who called the police stepped forward. "I didn't recognize him. He was just—" He looked suspicious. "He was alone, and I didn't know who he was." The mom looked at her son. "You were riding your bike, right?" "Yes, Mom, that's it." She nodded slowly, then turned back to the officers. "He's done nothing wrong, and if someone had simply spoken to him, this wouldn't be necessary." There was a long pause. Then the younger officer realized who she was. His eyes widened just a bit. He whispered something to the older officer, who suddenly straightened up. The woman wasn't just any mother, she was the state governor. Her face had appeared on the news, in public campaigns, and in the last election. She was known for her strong leadership and calm presence, and now she stood in front of them, no longer in a suit or behind a podium, but simply as a mother protecting her child. The woman who made the call stared, her mouth slightly open. The realization hit her hard. The governor turned to her and said gently but firmly, "Next time, if you're concerned, try kindness before suspicion. My son is not a threat. He's a child enjoying a Saturday." Nobody spoke. Even the birds seemed quiet. The officers thanked her and apologized to the boy before walking back to their car. The woman who made the call stood frozen, unsure what to say. Her neighbors, watching from a distance, gave her disapproving looks. As the SUV drove off with the boy and his mother, the bystanders slowly began to talk again. Some were angry, others just shaken. But everyone agreed. Something about today didn't sit right, and for one woman, standing alone on the sidewalk with her flowers still dry, the silence said it all. The police car slowly pulled up to the park just after the call had come in. The officers inside glanced at each other as they parked near the entrance. It was a warm afternoon and the park was busy, but the officers knew they had a report to check out. A report about a suspicious child riding a bike around the neighborhood. The first officer to step out was a man with a serious look on his face. He wore a standard uniform complete with a badge and a radio clipped to his shoulder. His partner, younger and more relaxed, followed behind him, scanning the scene with gentle eyes. They walked toward the boy, who had just parked his bike near a large tree. His expression changed when he saw the officers, a mix of curiosity and nervousness crossing his face. He stood up, brushing some dirt off his jeans. "Good afternoon," the older officer said as he approached. "We received a call about a boy riding around the park. Is that you?" "Yes, sir," the boy replied politely. "I live nearby. We just moved here recently." The officer nodded but looked at him carefully. "What's your name?" The boy gave his full name, clear and steady. He wasn't scared, but he wasn't smiling either. The younger officer crouched down beside the bike and gave it a quick look. It was a nice bike, nothing strange about it. "Do you have any ID with you?" the older officer asked. The boy nodded and pulled out his school ID from his backpack. It showed his picture, his name, and the new school he attended in the neighborhood. The officers exchanged a glance. Everything seemed in order, but they had to be careful. "Do you have your mom's number on your phone?" the younger officer asked kindly. "Yes, I do," the boy said, taking out his phone. His fingers trembled just a little. The small crowd of people who had been nearby began to notice the situation. Some looked worried, others curious. One woman quietly pulled out her phone and began recording from a distance. The boy scrolled through his contacts and dialed his mom's number. Before the call connected, the boy glanced around. He felt the eyes of strangers on him and wished the officers would hurry. Suddenly, the sound of a car pulling up interrupted the quiet. A black SUV rolled to a stop at the park entrance. The engine shut off and a woman stepped out with purpose. She was tall, dressed casually, but with a natural air of confidence. Her eyes searched the scene quickly, landing on the boy and the officers. She walked briskly toward them, her steps steady and strong. "Mom," the boy called out, relief flooding his voice. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him close for a moment. Then she looked at the officers and asked calmly, "What is happening here?" The older officer stepped forward. "Are you his mother?" "Yes," she said, her voice steady. The woman who had made the call stepped in. her face showing mixed emotions. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your son was acting suspicious. He was alone and riding around the park for a long time. I didn't recognize him." The boy looked at the woman, surprised and hurt. "I was just riding my bike," he said softly. The woman's motherly gaze softened, but she didn't hide her disappointment. "My son was doing exactly that, riding his bike, enjoying the park." The officers looked at the woman carefully, recognizing her now. They whispered among themselves before turning back to her with respect. She was the governor, a well-known leader in the state. Her presence changed the mood instantly. The woman who had called the police looked at the governor in shock. She couldn't believe the situation. The boy she thought was a stranger and a possible threat was actually the governor's son. The governor took a deep breath and addressed the woman with kindness but firmness. "I understand your concern, but I wish you had approached this situation differently. My son is a child just like any other. He deserves to be treated with respect and kindness." The crowd watching the scene began to whisper and nod in agreement. A few people started clapping quietly, showing support for the governor and her son. The officers apologized to the boy and promised to be more careful in the future. The woman who had made the call remained silent, realizing the weight of what had just happened. The governor put her arm around her son and walked toward the SUV. As they left, the boy's smile returned, but the day's events left a mark on him. The neighbors talked about the incident for days. Some were ashamed, others angry, but everyone agreed that the experience was a reminder of how quickly fear can turn into misunderstanding. The governor later spoke at a community event, sharing her son's story to encourage kindness and fairness. She reminded everyone that children should be allowed to be children, no matter where they come from or what they look like. In the end, the park returned to its peaceful state. But the lesson stayed with those who were there. A lesson about seeing others with open hearts, not suspicion. The moment the black SUV pulled up to the park, the atmosphere changed. People nearby noticed immediately. The boy's face lit up when he saw the woman step out of the vehicle. She walked toward him with a steady pace, her eyes full of concern but also calm strength. She looked like someone who had dealt with serious matters before, but this was a different kind of urgency. The kind that comes from a mother's heart. "Mom," the boy said as he ran toward her. She pulled him into a warm embrace, holding him close for a few seconds before stepping back and looking straight at the two police officers. "What is going on here?" she asked, her voice steady but firm. The officers looked at each other, realizing that this woman was not just any parent. There was a presence about her, something that made them straighten up and pay attention. One of them spoke carefully. "Ma'am, your son was reported as suspicious by a neighbor. We were just asking him some questions." She glanced at her son and saw the nervousness still on his face. The boy looked like he wanted to explain, but the moment had already become bigger than him. She turned back to the officers. "Is there any reason why you think my son was doing something wrong?" The woman who had called the police stood close by, looking uncomfortable now. She started to explain again. "I didn't recognize him. He was riding around the park alone for a long time. It felt suspicious." The governor's eyes softened, but her voice was clear. "Riding a bike alone? That's what kids do. I'm sorry if that made you uncomfortable. But suspicion should never come before kindness." There was a pause, a quiet moment where everyone seemed to hold their breath. Then the officers looked at the woman again and realized who she was. Whispers passed between them. They recognized her as the governor, someone important in the state, known for her leadership and dedication to justice. Suddenly, the tone shifted. The officers became respectful, even a little apologetic. The woman who had called the police looked down, clearly embarrassed. She hadn't expected to be talking to the governor herself. The governor stepped forward, looked the woman in the eye, and said calmly, "It's important for all of us to remember that children like my son deserve to feel safe and welcome in their own neighborhoods. They should not be treated as threats because of how they look." The crowd that had gathered around began to murmur. Some nodded quietly, others exchanged glances. A few people began clapping softly, showing their support. A woman standing nearby whispered to her friend, "That's the kind of leadership we need, and standing up for what's right." The younger officer said, "We're sorry, ma'am. We were just following the report." "I understand," the governor replied. "But I hope this can be a lesson for everyone, to look beyond fear and try to understand before jumping to conclusions." The boy, still standing close to his mother, looked up at her with gratitude. The fear in his eyes was starting to fade. He felt proud that his mom had come to stand up for him, but also sad that this had happened at all. The governor smiled softly at him and said, "You did nothing wrong. You're safe now." As the officers prepared to leave, the woman who had made the call finally spoke again, her voice quieter than before. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted to keep the neighborhood safe." The governor nodded gently. "We all want safety, but safety is built on trust, not fear. If we trust each other, we build stronger communities." The crowd slowly began to disperse, but the conversation did not end there. People nearby talked quietly among themselves about what had happened. Many were glad to see the governor so involved, using her influence to bring attention to an important issue. Later that evening, the governor sat at her kitchen table, talking with her son. He was still a little shaken, but glad it was over. They spoke about how sometimes people make mistakes, especially when they let fear take over. "We can't change everyone," she said gently, "but we can show kindness and patience. That's how things get better." Her son nodded, feeling hopeful. He knew that his mom's words mattered, not just for him, but for kids everywhere who might face unfair suspicion. The next day, the story was all over local news and social media. Videos of the moment when the governor arrived, and her calm but strong words spread quickly. People shared it widely, praising her for standing up against unfair treatment. Many talked about the importance of teaching respect and kindness to everyone, especially to children. The incident sparked discussions in schools, workplaces, and homes about how easy it is to judge others without knowing the full story. At a community meeting held later that week, the governor spoke directly to neighbors. She encouraged them to get to know one another, to reach out rather than assume the worst, and to build a neighborhood where everyone felt safe and included. "We are stronger when we listen," she said, "when we see each other as people, not threats." The woman who had made the call attended the meeting too. She listened quietly and later approached the governor to apologize in person. It was a difficult moment, but also one filled with understanding. They agreed that the experience had opened eyes and hearts. In the days that followed, the boy returned to the park on his bike, this time with other kids from the neighborhood. He smiled more easily, knowing that his mother's words were making a difference. A small group of neighbors even started a Park Friends Club, a way for families to connect and watch out for each other in a positive way. The governor's words and actions had sparked more than just a conversation. They had sparked a movement toward kindness, understanding, and community. As the sun set each evening, the park slowly quieted again, but the lessons learned that day stayed with everyone. The story was a reminder that fear can blind us, but kindness can open our eyes, and for the boy and his mother, it was a day that would never be forgotten. A day when a mother's love and a community's hope came together to create change. After the governor arrived and stood firmly beside her son, the mood in the park shifted completely. What had started as a tense moment filled with suspicion and worry now turned into something much bigger. The crowd around them grew quiet, watching carefully. People were waiting to see what would happen next. The woman who had called the police stood nearby, speechless and unsure of what to say. She felt the weight of the moment settling over her. The governor didn't raise her voice. She didn't shout or get angry. Instead, she spoke calmly, but every word carried power and meaning. "My son is a child. Like all children, he deserves to feel safe," she said. "I want to remind everyone here that our fear sometimes makes us see threats where there are none. But children, no matter who they are or what they look like, are not threats." The woman who had made the call looked down at her hands. She had been certain she was protecting the neighborhood, but hearing these words made her question her own feelings. She hadn't wanted to cause pain or fear. She had only been acting on what she thought was right. The governor continued, "It's easy to let fear guide us, but it takes courage to choose understanding instead, to see people as neighbors, not strangers, to welcome children as children, not as dangers." There was a pause. The people who had gathered felt the truth in her words. Some nodded silently. Others wiped away tears. A few pulled out their phones and started recording, capturing this important moment. One by one, neighbors began to speak up. A mother said, "I think we all need to do better. We want our community to be safe, yes, but we also want it to be kind." Another added, "This is a wake-up call for me. I want to learn how to be less quick to judge." The governor smiled gently. That's what I hope. That today is a moment we all remember. A moment to choose kindness. The officers who had come to the park stood quietly, listening. The younger one stepped forward and said, "We're sorry for how this went. We didn't mean to scare anyone, especially not a child." The governor nodded. "I appreciate that. And I believe that with training and awareness, police and communities can work together better." The woman who had made the call finally spoke, her voice small but honest. "I'm sorry. I didn't think about how my fear might hurt someone." The governor walked over and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Apologies are a strong step. Now let's all work to make sure this doesn't happen again." After that, the governor invited the crowd to join her in a conversation. She wanted to hear their stories, their fears, and their hopes. The people stayed sitting on the grass or standing near the benches, sharing quietly. One man said, "I've lived here for years, and I never thought twice about who belonged and who didn't. Today made me realize how important it is to be welcoming." A teenager spoke about feeling unsafe when strangers come near. The governor listened carefully and nodded, understanding the challenges young people face in the world today. The conversation lasted over an hour. It wasn't easy. Some people had hard things to say, some were angry or sad, but through it all, the governor's calm presence helped guide the group toward understanding. As the sun began to set, she stood up and said, "Thank you all for coming. Today is just the beginning. I will work with leaders in the community to start programs that teach respect, kindness, and understanding. We will build a neighborhood where everyone feels safe and welcome." The crowd applauded. The woman who had made the call stayed back for a moment, then approached the governor again. "I want to help," she said quietly. The governor smiled warmly. "That's exactly what we need. People willing to learn and grow." The next day, news outlets picked up the story. Videos of the governor speaking to the crowd spread quickly online. Many people praised her for handling the situation with grace and strength. Others spoke about the important message she shared about bias, fear, and community. Schools in the area invited the governor to talk to students about kindness and inclusion. She accepted, sharing her son's story to help young people understand how easy it is to judge unfairly, and how powerful it is to choose kindness instead. Meanwhile, the boy began to feel safer in the neighborhood. He still rode his bike in the park, but now he was joined by friends. Some of the kids who had watched the incident unfold came over to say hello. The park became a place of laughter again. His mother watched with pride, knowing that this moment had started something important. It wasn't just about her son. It was about every child, every family, every person who deserved to be treated with respect. Over the following weeks, the governor worked closely with community leaders and police departments to create new training programs. The focus was on teaching people how to recognize and overcome bias, how to listen, and how to build trust. The woman who had made the call became involved in these efforts too. She spoke openly about her mistake and the lessons she learned. Her willingness to change helped others feel hopeful about healing. At the same time, the neighborhood began to change. Neighbors started organizing events, potlucks, and group activities to get to know each other better. The Park Friends group grew, bringing families together with the simple goal of caring for their community. One afternoon, the governor and her son visited the park together. They walked past the mural that had been painted on a wall near the entrance. The mural showed children of many backgrounds playing together with the words, "Kindness is our strongest community." Her son stopped and smiled. "I like this," he said softly. She nodded. "Me too. It's a promise we all make to each other." That day, as the sun dipped below the trees, the governor and her son sat on a bench, watching children play. It was quiet and peaceful. The hard moment from weeks before felt far away, replaced by hope and possibility. The story had begun with suspicion and fear, but it ended with something much stronger, a community coming together to choose kindness over fear, respect over suspicion, and hope over division. And in that choice, they found something worth protecting, not just a neighborhood, but the heart of what it means to be human. After weeks had passed since that day at the park, life in the neighborhood began to change in quiet but meaningful ways. The story of the boy, his mother, the governor, and the woman who had called the police had touched many hearts. It was more than just a local news story now. It had become a conversation about how people see each other and how communities can grow stronger through understanding. The governor kept busy, working with city leaders, police officers, and community groups. Together, they created programs focused on teaching respect and kindness. They brought in teachers, counselors, and leaders to talk with families and children. The goal was simple: to build bridges instead of walls, to listen instead of judge. One afternoon, the governor visited a local school to speak with students. She sat down in a bright classroom filled with curious young faces. Many of them had heard the story on the news, but hearing it directly from her made it real and personal. She told them about the day her son had been stopped in the park, how fear had caused a neighbor to call the police, even though her son was just a kid riding his bike. She talked about how important it was to see beyond skin color, beyond first impressions. Sometimes we let fear make us see things that aren't true, she said gently. But we can choose to be brave enough to get to know someone before making a judgment. The children listened closely. Some nodded, others asked questions. One student raised a hand and asked, "What can we do if we see someone being treated unfairly?" The governor smiled warmly. "You can stand up for them. You can speak kindly. You can ask questions and try to understand. Even small acts of kindness can change the world." After the talk, many children approached her to share their own stories or simply to say thank you. The governor felt hopeful. She knew the future could be better if young people learned to see the world through kind eyes. Back in the neighborhood, the Park Friends group was growing. Families who had never met before were now organizing picnics, bike rides, and cleanup days. The park, once a place of tension, had become a place of joy and community. One sunny afternoon, the boy and his mother walked through the park together. The boy pointed out the new benches that had been added, the colorful flowers planted along the paths, and the signs reminding everyone to be kind and respectful. "This place feels different now," the boy said quietly. His mother smiled. "It does, because people chose to make it better." As they walked, they noticed a small group of children playing a game nearby. Some of the kids were from different backgrounds, different families, but they laughed and played as if they were lifelong friends. The boy thought about how different things might have been if the police hadn't come or if his mother hadn't arrived that day. He knew it had been a hard moment, but also a turning point, not just for him, but for the whole community. Later that week, the governor met again with police leaders. They talked about new training programs to help officers understand how to approach situations with empathy and care. The goal was to build trust between the police and the community, so no one would feel afraid or unfairly targeted. The governor said, "We want every child and every family to feel safe. And we want every officer to know how to protect that safety with respect and kindness." One officer shared a story about a time he had learned to listen more carefully, to see people's faces and not just their situations. The governor nodded, proud of the progress being made. At home, the boy was feeling stronger too. He still loved riding his bike in the park, but now he had friends to ride with him. They raced along the paths, their laughter filling the air. Sometimes they stopped to talk or help each other fix a chain or pump a tire. His mother watched him play and knew that the difficult moment had led to something good. The boy had learned about courage, about standing tall even when others might judge you unfairly. She had learned, too, about the power of speaking up and standing together. One evening, the governor sat with her son on their front porch. The sky was painted with soft colors as the sun set. The boy looked thoughtful and said, "Mom, do you think things will always be better now?" She smiled softly. "I hope so. But change takes time. What matters is that we keep trying and every day to be kind and fair." The boy nodded. "I want to help. I want to make sure no one else feels scared like I did." "That's a brave heart," she said, squeezing his hand. Word about the governor's work spread beyond the neighborhood. Other communities started reaching out, asking for advice on how to build trust and understanding. The governor spoke at events, sharing her story and encouraging others to face fear with kindness. She said again and again, "When we see each other as people, with stories and feelings, we can build a better world. It starts with small acts of courage, choosing to listen, to understand, to care." The boy's story became a symbol, not just about a single day in a park, but about hope for many days ahead. It was a reminder that even in moments of fear and misunderstanding, love and courage could shine through. And the neighborhood? It became a place where children could ride their bikes freely, where neighbors greeted each other with smiles, and where respect was the foundation of every conversation. The governor's son looked forward to each day knowing that change was possible. He knew that the world wasn't perfect, but it could be better if people chose kindness over fear, understanding over judgment, and in that choice, the story found its true meaning, a story of hope, courage, and the simple but powerful truth that everyone deserves to be seen and treated with respect.